Justin, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, sir. So one thing that I just want to honor and appreciate you for, Boomer, is putting yourself on the slab. I'm a big believer in being vulnerable, and I think it's a superpower to have, because I don't believe anybody deserves to be on a pedestal whatsoever. I think everybody has the same opportunities, and that's really a beautiful thing where we're able to share parts of ourselves with the rest of the world. And so when you really get to the basis of LifePrint, it's really a tool of communication. Because once you start to understand somebody else, you can then really communicate with them on their level and discover what's really important for them to experience. And so it takes your connection to such a deeper level of depth. But for now, we will be going into Boomer's analysis. So LifePrint, we've developed a technology that will basically do the analysis and do all the maths and the calculations. And so we don't have to teach the formulas anymore, which took a lot of time in our trainings. So now we actually give the technology to everybody that's attending a 3-day event with us, where they'll learn to become a self-leader, really. And so this is really the app that you're looking at right now. And so we're just going to go to the calculator, and we're going to basically put in Boomer's name. And then, Boomer, what day were you born?
February 28th, 1986.
So we've basically put Boomer's information in. You can see there's a business marker. We can basically develop teams and see the neurological wirings of teams. We can basically also have a look at the relationship between partners or families. But we're basically just looking at the individual at the moment, which is Boomer. And so you'll notice in the calculator, you've got your age, your date of birth, your name. And this is where it starts to get interesting, because we basically see what life cycle and what day and year and month you're experiencing at the moment. And so currently you're 32 years old, so you're well into your nesting and building phase. So the nesting and building phase is really about partnerships, relationships, building. It's the first practical developmental stage that we go through. We're taking all of our experience from the bachelor years, our emotional learning years, and our intellectual programming, and really putting into practice the practical side of building something. And so you'll be in this for another 3 years before you move into your own personal independence and freedom. That basically is going to look like looking back and saying, right, I've done what's expected of me now. Now I really want something that's to expand and to move around. Currently, at the moment, this year, within that building year, it's all about networking, getting the information out there, and there's a lot of movement, and it seems to be more freedom-based. So you'll probably find that this year there's been more travel than usual. There's been a lot more sharing of information. And so this year will be really highlighted by that in terms of whatever it is you're nesting or building at the moment. Specifically this month, so there's probably a lot of movement that's happening this month and a lot of plans for that movement. And I love this, and I love the interaction, because as I speak, you will always know, because the information will start to resonate. And so typically if I go back, I can actually map back. If I go here and we go, okay, cool, let's have a look at where was I last month in April. And so if we go to April, I can basically see, oh, okay, April was actually a very challenging month. There was a lot of interruptions where I was being shown different pieces that I either had to rise to the occasion, or I had to cut those aspects out because the tree needed to be trimmed in order for the growth to evolve. And so that growth is really coming out of this month. And so last month, there were a few things that needed to be tweaked and challenges that basically showed their face.
Wow. And so, Justin, a lot of this stuff, I mean, like I sit here and say stress and movement and sharing of ideas. This definitely resonates well with my month. What's the underlying here, if you don't mind me asking? Because some people may look at this and say, I'm curious how these equations come out. If you look at the current month, for instance, and this resonates really well, but other than you and I having sort of friendly conversations, I haven't really shared too much about my life, hitting it smack dab on the head of the nail. How does that happen?
Well, it's basically with the understanding, and I'll just really speak to the audience. I'm not going to go too much into the science of it. We touched a little bit on it earlier by saying your energetic resonance, your pattern, your energy has a signature. So you can just think of it as an energetic signature, okay? And so that energetic signature is having a relationship with this day that I'm having right now, which is made up of a completely different energy signature.
Okay.
And so it's just basically the way to look at it is an entanglement of energy for where I am within this moment and point within my life, and the feedback and feed forward loop of information that's happening on a moment to moment basis. And so everything is basically unified. And this is what we really mean, where we look at the basis of it being based on unified physics, is the math actually shows that the surface volume of a proton, so for those that don't know, a proton is basically the nucleus, the center of an atom. The mass volume of the surface of a proton is exactly the same energy and has the same mass as the entire universe. And so all information is connected on that surface volume. And so no matter what you're experiencing in your life, there is a learning and evolutionary process where the whole universe is actually learning through your experience and engagement. You are literally at the center of your own universe and have access to an incredible amount of energy and information and power. And I don't think people actually realize what their potential really is when they actually get it. And what the math and what the science is really showing. And so I think there's going to be an evolution of just potential that's going to be released when people actually get what this information means as it filters down into the mass population, because that's really where it starts to make that change. Is we have these breakthroughs in science, but it hasn't really filtered down into the field yet where it's an everyday experience. All we're measuring is your signature against where it is, what resonance is it having today? What's the experience in the month, the day, the year, and what am I going through? So I can see last year was like a hugely challenging year for you. Last year was literally like everything almost had to break.
Yeah. Well, speaking of vulnerability, you're absolutely right there.
I can even track it back to the month last year where everything literally snapped. And that just shows you, and basically when you're empowered with this information, your engagement with what's going on when it happens is completely different to you not knowing. It's not a psychic app. We can't tell you, oh no, you're going to get your foot's going to get run over by a red car tomorrow. But we can basically, like you said, speak to it and frame it in a language so that you understand exactly what the environmental conditions are and how you are interacting and engaging with it at the time. And so it's incredibly accurate in terms of that, but you lose the detail of what exactly the experience is. So if you know and you're prepared, when those things do come up, you're like, oh, okay, that's a pattern interrupt instead of just going into the reaction. It gives you time to pause and then take a self-reflective look before you take action.
That is definitely very helpful.
Cool. So that's kind of where you're at right now. We then kind of come down and we look at the physical consciousness. So this is your everyday life on how you process. It's based on dynamic systems. That means that there's information that's being constantly recycled. But the whole experience of Boomer is really governed by your neurological archetype. The neurological archetype just lets me know what your predominant wiring is in your brain. It basically means, if we have a look here, when you express yourself, expression meaning how do I take action in the environment, how do I engage with the environment, it's a very left brain dominant, assertive, expressive, and moving energy. Okay, so you're not a very passive person. You're very kind of motivated, you're very movement, and you're very assertive. It means you left brain energetically expressing yourself. Doesn't mean you don't have a right brain, you can't be passive. It just means basically that that's going to govern the experience. Yet in your decision-making process, you're also left-brained. And so you will make decisions based on goal orientations.
It's fascinating because it kind of nails me on the head, but that's great.
Right. And so we really call this our neurological archetype the high achiever. So the high achiever is really the overachiever or the mastermind. And this archetype will always want more and thinks no matter what it's already achieved, it could have done it better, or there's something to be improved upon.
For those who can't see my face right now, I'm laughing because this is just, it's me to a T.
And so your whole experience is really governed by continually looking for more and better and bigger ideas to either be acknowledged or achieved. And so this combination of thinking intellectually through ideas, deciding, and then launching and taking action on those findings really usually means that the high achievers are good at taking on intricate and risky ventures where other people would really feel uncomfortable and kind of out of their depth. But this really keeps them on the cutting edge and evolving. And so by definition, you're down to earth, you're capable, you're practical, you're efficient, you're a traditionalist that really makes sure that procedures are adhered to and standards are met. And so you're very much aware of what's going on around you, and you like to be where the action is. Typically, you'll be the kind of person that will roll up their sleeves and just get on with things and do it. And so you're normally found at the center of the action. This makes you a very action-orientated person that likes to plan their work in advance, or if it's easy, we'll just get on and do things. But you're very analytical and decisive. So what really stands out about you, Boomer, is that you're logical, systematic, you're efficient, capable, and practical, but also very conscientious and well-organized. And so that's going to really govern your experience. And so now we're going to go a little, basically a zoom in, and we're going to start having a look at how this experience is governed by the different personality roles through which we look up at the signature. And so your whole energetic signature, to give you an idea, looks like this. And so it's a torsion field that basically will expand and contract, bringing in information. Information basically spirals up through the field. We have inspiration. And so inspiration is really that information that filters through all our belief systems, and eventually we have a conscious thought. That conscious thought is then acted upon as it expresses itself in a feed-forward loop, meaning expressive into the environment, and the environment then feeds back information. We cycle that, process it, and then it goes back down into the field, and so we have this expansion and contraction of information and expression and energy and engagement all the time. And so we don't live in a closed system, we live in a very open system that's evolving, expanding, and then unifying all the time.
It's very cool.
So when we basically look at that structure and we come into it, we look at different personality inputs and where they're playing out. So your first input here, you'll see a sense of sight and home. This describes typically what a person looks like, what their outward expression is, and what their personality pattern is that they play at home. So amongst friends and family that know you very well, or a partner that knows you very well, this is the typical personality that will play out. And so we find you within the leader, playing the leader at home, someone that really likes to know that and be acknowledged that they're important to the people that they care about. And that's a very high driving need for you, is to make sure that, you have to be respected for your ideas, for the bright, creative movement that happens forward. And so at home, you really play the leadership role, meaning that you will organize everything around you unconsciously so that you're looked up to and respected. Leaders basically, like I said, have a high driving need for significance, but also certainty. And so certainty in the belief in their ideas and their projects, and really being able to reach a high level within life and awareness at home. So your typical patterns of behavior here would be someone that's very bright, very talkative, likes to share their ideas, very creative, that is literally very talkative and is airy and kind of moves around a lot. Typically, leaders are very proud people, and they really don't appreciate insincere gratitude or appreciation. They actually kind of think people weak for it. And so if somebody's really stroking your ego to blow smoke or gaslight, it's something that is picked up very, very quickly. Leaders are typically very, very jolly and just confident, assertive people. However, when that personality pattern becomes reactive, so you'll probably find that you hate being ignored, you don't like being interrupted. Also, in terms of that, when you're not being heard or you're not being shown that significance, or you lack the certainty and belief of your ideas, your typical reactive patterning will be somebody that becomes a little grumpy, may be intolerant of other people around them. And if you're not being heard, you may get at home a little bit kind of temperamental, let's call it that way.
You could have used another word.
Leaders also typically will, if they're not getting the significance, another reactive pattern, they may become egotistical and become very brash. However, when they're kind of lacking their confidence in their projects, or their ideas are not being heard, or they're not being shown or being appreciated, they can slip into low self-esteem and a depressive state, where they suffer a little bit with lethargy. And so they just will take a little bit longer to get going. And so that's typically the personality pattern that you'll play at home, and what people will basically, your close friends and family will see. When you step out into a business atmosphere or into a business environment, into a social standing where you're not familiar, that changes. You're a lot more confident at home and talkative at home than you are when you're in a social circle, so to speak, that you're unfamiliar. Different when you're with your friends out socially, because then you'll be playing more of that leader role with them. But if I take you outside of a comfort zone where you're completely unfamiliar with your environment, the nurturer then comes out. And so the highest driving need here is connection. Although nurturers tend to be the social butterflies, they're a little bit shy, and so they're very much quieter. And so you'll notice that the language patterns that you use and the way that you sound is very different to how people actually see you when they meet you. And so typically for a lot of people, I don't know if you've ever had this experience or some of the audience have had this experience, but have you noticed that when you speak to somebody on the phone and then you meet them in person and it's like they don't look like they sound?
100%. Am I one of those people?
Well, yeah. And so this is basically what happens is they're hearing the vibrational tone of the personality of the sound and what's being played out within a business and social environment, compared to what the person really looks like. And typically these are different, but they can also be the same depending on the signature. And so typically you're a lot quieter in that social environment. Your highest driving need is connection. So for business, for you, it's very important to have connection and resonance that's also very governed by security. And so if you don't feel, and this is the incredible thing about the nurturer too, is they're so incredibly intuitive. They are able to pick up very subtle nuances within energy. So for instance, they'll be very observant. So if you're sitting at a table engaging in communication and conversation, you will still also notice everything that's going around you. Basically what's being served on that table, this woman needs a light for a cigarette, and the waiter's a little bit lost going to the table trying to find something, yet still remain fully engaged in conversation. And so nurturers are highly intuitive. They're very, very observant, caring, social personalities. They have a tendency to be very timid and reserved. So in a social environment, you would very much look after other people first to make sure they're comfortable. And the minute other people are comfortable, then you feel comfortable. And so it's really about security and connection that plays the highest driving need in your social context. When we drop down, we really have the sense of taste. So we've got sense of sight, how we look, sense of sound, how we sound, and social and different personalities at home and where we play. When we come into the sense of taste, we really look at what your purpose and what your career objective is. And for you, you play the negotiator. So within a career, it's important that you're able to express a compassionate heart with a focus on societal development and passions really taking the forefront. That can be anything from presentation to marketing to advertising to social endeavors to anything that really brings harmony and balance, because that's the highest driving need. So you'll need a lot of balance through compassion and harmony within any job choice or purpose-driven task that you have a look at. And what you're really identifying with is other people will see the sides of you like the leader, or notice you as a very caring and sincere person when you connect with them in a social environment. But you will really identify with someone that is very focused, that is very organized, and that has very strong belief systems in terms of a dynamic. So you prefer things to be very, very structured. And so you internally, as you know yourself to be, you're driven by independence. And so independence is a very high driving need for you. So if you find yourself being codependent in any way, that is when you will start to react. And that will basically shift the tables. And that's really governed by your sense of instinct. And so this is really where I look at when working with people is how is their instinct? Their instinct is their gut. It's the gut brain. And so we've got 3 brains. And so instinct within the gut brain really determines how stressed out we are and whether we're switching into a proactive or reactive cycle. So in order to keep your instinct really in balance and in check, it's about creating more security and how much I am able to contribute. And so if I find that I am not able to contribute, or if I'm overwhelmed, or if I feel my gut feels insecure about the security that it's trying to create, my whole spiral will slip. And so the relationships that I have, I may become defensive, I may become irrational and make irrational decisions within my relationships at home. And so we'll combine the nurturer. And so you're really governed by a lot of connection. Connection is really important for you, but connection that's not dependent. And so really what happens here is you're caring, nurturing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You probably feel guilty for turning your phone off in case somebody needs help, and you miss the phone call. But you really there for family and friends, you do everything. And so you are more focused on serving others than you are yourself for the most part. And you really don't ask for help when you really should. Because you think that if you have to, you've failed in some way. And so this is really governed by high contribution factors and security and connection. So when you express yourself, you're very focused, organized. The organizer who you identify with is actually really hard to get down. They're incredibly optimistic people. But when they go into a reactive cycle, they tend to suffer with a bit of an attitude problem. They get hostile, they engage, and they become argumentative. Although your argumentative nature will be dulled and kind of softened a little bit because the negotiator doesn't like to burn bridges, likes to keep harmony. The nurturers really care about other people. And so this is how it kind of goes in terms of the patterns of the proactive and reactive spirals. So the leader and the nurturer basically working together do have a little bit of a reactive patterning of becoming a little bit withdrawn, a little bit moody and gloomy. And so you'll basically be a masculine woman that has cycles every month, just like a woman does in terms of the mood flows. And so it's very important for you to monitor and to stay in that proactive state because the highs and lows are quite large, if that makes sense. There's no dimmer switch with you, Boomer, which means it's either all the way on or it's all the way off.
And so knowing this information, I can perceive what's coming, sort of the down part of the roller coaster, and make some changes, right?
Exactly. But also to know that this is normal for you. This isn't going away.
Yeah.
This is who you are. It's not a good or a bad thing. This is just the cycle of the patterning of Boomer. And so if I understand this, I know there's nothing wrong with me, but I know it's an indicator, okay, right now, what is the driving need underneath? Well, it is to have more connection. But is it to have more connection with myself or the person in my life? And how am I going about achieving that? Because for me, behavior is tertiary. It comes third. People mostly go, well, where does the behavior come from? And they go, well, emotion. We all know, okay, cool, great. Emotion is the energy in motion, and then the behavior is the result. But what drives the emotion?
And that's what we're looking at here.
And so that's what we're looking at here. What's driving the behavior is really the need that's underneath it. And let me tell you a little secret. When you stop waiting to get acknowledgement from the environment to validate your needs and you start generating your own needs, that's where you move into becoming a very powerful, energetic, generative experience creator. Like you generate your own experience and you're not reacting to the environmental conditions that are being imposed at the time. And so this really gives you an ability to be your own self-leader, interrupt yourself before. I've got a saying, self-disrupt before you self-destruct. And so really being able to take accountability for your own behavior, bring awareness around that so you can evaluate what's right for me. Because only through evaluation will you be able to enhance something. It's the same thing. How do you know you're going to enhance it? How do I know I'm going to enjoy this car? How do I know, everything gets evaluated first, so that you've got a baseline on what to enhance, and so people can evolve. And so that's really the system that takes a look at it.
Just one thing, Justin, the identity point. Does that relate to the types of people, and I think you said this earlier, but I just wanted to double check, is the types of people that I associate with and gravitate towards?
This is kind of who you identify with as a person. So people may see you like this, but you know yourself to be like this.
Okay, gotcha.
So that's just the differentiator.
Gotcha.
Your partner, so are you married?
Bessie is a long-term girlfriend, no ring yet.
Right, and so that's fine. So long term, she will see these behaviors come out. She will also be able to see and identify with you being an organizer.
Okay.
She will know that it's important for you to be independent. It's important for you to be able to come and go and there's no neediness. It's important for you to be able to be independent and be able to move. And she will see those extremes and that high positivity and optimism where others may not. They will see more other sides, being the nurturer in the social, or the leader at home in terms of sharing ideas and being communicative and really being quite talkative. And then you go into the social environment and you actually shut up.
It's nailed me again on the head, so to speak. But this is great, Justin. And again, I interrupted you, so I'll let you continue.
I prefer it, Boomer, because it's engaging. This is life. We engage all the time, and it's good for you to extract information. And for me, this is your process. And so it's really, really good to have a look. So that's how you pretty much process and make decisions. And so in order to stay in a proactive state, an encouraging state, we really have a look at, it's kind of very subtle. It's in the back of the mind. And so for you, based on a decision-making process, to stay in a proactive state, is this being revolutionary enough? Is this working towards a greater vision that's going to help change things? Your intellect is really governed by a lot of kind of maverick behavior. Let's put it that way. It's hugely futuristic. It's very visionary, and it's not really accepted because it's too far ahead. And so basically profits are never really accepted at first within society. And so in order to stay in a proactive state, just keep with that vision, with that mindset, and not to become discouraged or disparaged by it, meaning not to become prejudiced towards other institutions or things that aren't, or people that aren't, because that'll basically hold the integrity switch. And if that happens, if you make decisions based on being unpredictable, being kind of prejudiced, or kind of that mindset, it's going to switch everything. And so when you're taking action in your life, it's very important for you to ask the decision, is this bringing me closer to balance? Is this going to bring more harmony into my life? Is this going to bring more opportunity into my life? If I find my actions demonstrating absorbed behavior, or being too demanding of others, or is literally put into that space, it's going to go reactive. And so everything that you say must be moving towards more certainty and giving more certainty. Be certain about the things that you're saying, and have a look at the patterns of your language, and make sure that it always has an overtone of almost a spiritual connectivity nature, which is very important. If it becomes reactive, it's going to really sound uncertain and be driven by uncertainty. And that is literally means everything that you say is going to be governed by control. And so it's a false sense of security, or a false sense of certainty, because you're trying to control things through that patterning to just settle the anxiety that's there. And so that's really how to stay in a proactive mindset. But how you approach your life is quite interesting. And so that's your sense of smell. This is how the information is feedbacking and how you're engaging with the environment. Mm-hmm. You can see that there's the child there.
What does that mean?
This personality pattern is just a wondrous gift.
Okay.
And an absolute curse at the same time. Because you really approach your life high functioning, perceptive nature. You're very, very intuitive, but this makes you impulsive. And so when you fly with your gut, you really jump in. You just know. You don't know how you know. And if somebody asks you for how you got that solution, you won't be able to tell them, but you know it's right. And so the child really approaches its life very intuitively. It may daydream a lot, but that daydreaming is literally how it's getting to these huge awareness light bulb moments. Yet it's very determined. And so you're the type of person that just won't give up. You're the child sitting playing a level for 3 hours at the same boss at the end of the level, and you're like, I'm not going to bed. I'm not moving from this position until I beat this guy. And so that determination is hugely proactive in the way that it does things, because it's very vulnerable, it's very artistic, it's got a lot of forgiveness. And so typically you will be led down the garden path very often because you are so vulnerable, innocent, and naive. And so you have possibly been taken advantage of in the past, where now you've had to just be a little bit more cautious, but yet that child gets excited and then jumps right in and does something impulsive or foolish. But those are great lessons, and so amazing growth comes from that. Your lesson, though, and what's something that you will have to really have a look at in your life, and something that needs to be constantly worked on, is your self-worth and your appreciation of self and self-value and confidence of self. And so self-esteem and a strong self-worth is something that's possibly been a bit of a challenge for you. And so the belief in your own projects, your own ideas, and this is where the instinct comes in, because if it feels any insecurity, it's going to basically play the victim role or the sacrificial lamb, because instinctively you just want everybody to come together. Instinctively you want to be patient and support everybody. And when you can't do that, it goes into an insecurity and a reactive cycle that becomes overwhelmed. And so you may become irrational or defensive in your relationships, get withdrawn or gloomy, and that's going to play out at home, being grumpy and intolerant of those around you, or just being there. And so that's typically what will happen in your cycles and how it develops. You definitely, if we have a look at how the universe moves you, you naturally moved into positions to share knowledge and share inventions and things that you've actually found out and created. And so you naturally moved into environments to share. It's a natural movement that you feel just happens, and is the way that the universe moves you in a certain direction. And typically we look at that. But internally as a potential, your seed of potential is you're here to shake shit up. And so you're here to be a revolutionary. You're here to be a maverick. You're here to shake the tree so the dead leaves fall. You're here to basically show and point out the things that people don't necessarily like to have a look at. And sometimes that path is being, like I said, being internally knowing that there's a great vision here and that we're not really even scratching the surface. For a lot of people, that's uncomfortable. Change is not is always seen as a stress on the body.